Today, I'll show you a science fiction movie title next. We see a fast glimpse of a woman. We also see a man sitting at a cafe looking at his watch, noting that it's 9 minutes over 8. He suddenly turns to look at the entrance for a few seconds, but he gets disappointed and leaves soon after. Next, we are in Las Vegas, where the man will perform a magic trick. We learn his name is Chris and that he will magically predict things before. He also tells us that he's not a god and can only see 2 minutes into his own future. Except for when he saw that woman in the cafe. As he is gambling, the owl starts to suspect Chris is tricking the deck. That same instant Chris looks up into the camera. They comment that it's like he can hear them as they send security after him. Chris gets up to leave. He goes to switch his chips for cash. But as he does, he suddenly sees a man pulling his gun to rob the cashier. And when a cop tries to stop him, he shoots both the cashier and the cop. But in reality, it hasn't happened yet. Where the man has drawn his gun. Chris jumps on him and disarms him. 2 guards appear and tell Chris to drop the gun. He starts running through the casino to get out of trouble, and the guards start chasing him. However, since Chris can see the future, he begins to calmly walk around, doing things that make all the security guards trying to catch him fail to notice him. The security manager, who is watching Monitor, gets frustrated seeing all the guards missing him, even though he is walking around right in front of them. Chris makes it to the exit and steals a car, and a car chase ensues with. As Chris tries to evade them, he suddenly drives over a railway track and a train crashes into him. But again, it hasn't happened yet. And since Chris knows what is going to happen, he accelerates and manages to dodge the train, successfully escaping the police. Meanwhile, the woman from the casino, who we learn is an FBI agent called Callie, is watching a replay of the CAS. Escaping, asking another agent beside her if he can explain it. He tells her he hasn't time because Russia is missing a 10-kiloton nuclear weapon, and they need every agent on it. To him, that Chris may be an asset, and he gives her 5 days to catch Chris. Callie then picks up the head of casino security and asks him what happened. After having explained that Chris looked up, started talking about him, she concludes, "You just have to enter his consciousness for Chris to see what you are going to do next." We then see Chris arriving at a garage, meeting an older man and giving him. To which the old man asks how he could ever repay him. They then start talking, and the man tells him that he got to forget the woman he sees in his head. But Chris tells, "You've seen her show up at the cafe at 9 minutes over 8 and will stay till he meets her." Suddenly Chris looks at his watch and senses Kelly coming. The older man tells him to run, but he wants to stay to see what she has to say. She arrives and tells him about the nuclear bomb being smuggled into the US and asks him to look ahead so they can get it. He assures her it's a magic act, but she doesn't believe him and threatens to put him in prison, but he won't help, and suddenly cops rush in to get him. However, in reality, Callie hasn't arrived yet. Chris just saw it in his. So he takes off. She arrives and misses him by seconds. Simultaneously, a man and woman are seen hurting the head of security of the casino to get info about Chris. Next day, Chris is at the cafe again. He looks at his watch and turns to the entrance. At exactly 9 minutes over 8, and to his surprise, the woman he is seeing finally enters. Chris wants to get to know her. And so as she is sat down, Chris walks up to her and asks if he may join her, which she doesn't want and rejects him. But apparently it all just happened in Chris' mind. And so, walking up to her again, trying something else, this time asking her about coffee beans used for the coffee, to which she replies he should ask a waitress again. It didn't happen, and Chris instead tries asking her for a lighter to light a cigarette, but she tells him she doesn't smoke. As he begins attempting a fourth strategy, she now stops him before he even gets to his feet. Chris then pauses momentarily when suddenly a man called Kendall enters the cafe and walks up to the woman who he calls Liz and angrily tells her he wants a couple minutes to figure things out. Liz tells him he is hurting her. Chris interrupts and stops Kendall, who tries to punch Chris, but Chris dodges every move, but Liz just leaves. Chris now walks up again to stop Kendall, but this time he doesn't dodge. Kendall's attempts to hit him. After being hit, Liz yells at Kendall to go and then helps Chris up. The two talk, and Chris mentions he's supposed to be, but his car has been stolen. Liz then offers to give him a ride, since she's surprisingly going the same way. They end up driving along together. Callie and her partner go, where they learn that Chris came there twice a day for a week at exactly 8. 9, had a martini, and then left. Except for today, when he met this woman. Callie asks where they went, and a waitress overheard. They headed for Flagstaff. Meanwhile, at a harbor somewhere, the man who harmed the head of security of the casino earlier is seen talking with members of the mob unloading what seems to be the nuclear weapon. The man with the tie then tells the man who hurt the head of casino security to get rid of Chris, since the cops seem so interested in him. We see Chris and Liz get to a North American tribe in the Grand Canyon, where Liz teaches kids once a week. The kids later ask Liz if Chris is her boyfriend, but she assures them he is not. They tell her it looks like Chris likes her, though. Chris walks up to one of the boys called Jake, whose birthday is today, and is a magic trick for him. Liz later tells Chris he's odd but charming. That evening, Liz accidentally falls asleep on Alder while he's driving. She wakes up as they get to a part of the road that has been washed away by the rain, and they have to return back to a motel. Since there is only one bed, Chris sleeps. Simultaneously, the police are gaining on them. Having found out which motel they are at, they have also located the nuclear bomb with a 95% certainty to be in South. Kelly wants to use all resources available to obtain Chris so he can help them find the nuke, and so they deploy a squad to get him. The mob is spying on the FBI and decides to follow them to get to Chris. Back at the motel, Chris gives Liza a rose as she gets out of the shower, telling her she's beautiful, after which they start making out on their way to the motel. Kelly gets a call from her office and finds out somebody is following them to Chris. Having slept together, Chris suddenly wakes up seeing something happening in the future. Later that morning, the FBI hotel room, Kelly intercepts Liz, and they sit down in a car, all of which the mob sees from afar. Liz has then shown the footage when Chris stopped the man with a gun in the casino and how he told the two cops appearing that the man was going to shoot two people. They tell her Chris is a delusional sociopath, and she becomes scared. She is given a drug to put in his drink that will make Chris fall asleep in 5 minutes, but she is told she must do it. 2 minutes after Chris has left the room, she goes back in and tells Chris to wash up as she makes breakfast. Simultaneously, the mob is ready to shoot Chris if they get a clean shot. 2 minutes later, she puts it into a drink. But as Chris comes out and is about to drink it, Liz stops him and tells him everything that happened. Chris switches the drink with one that is not drugged and goes out on the balcony to drink it. The mob doesn't get a clear shot, and the FBI now thinks there is 5 minutes until he falls asleep. Chris then goes back in and explains to Liz that the man in the casino was going to kill 2 people. It just hadn't happened yet. Liz thinks he is delusional, but to prove he is not, Chris switches through channels on the TV, quoting what people are saying on the TV before they say it. He explains he sees events in the future that will affect him, but only 2 minutes into the future. Except when he saw her. And asks what the FBI wants with him, and he says it's concerning national security, but that he can't help them since 2 minutes is too short to be helpful. Chris gives her $10,000 in an envelope, tells her to read what he writes down on a paper and then to wait exactly 45 seconds before doing what it says. Kelly, who feels like something is wrong, rushes out and sees Chris going out of the motel room, looking right at her. Chris then looks at his watch and then jumps down the cliffside. The FBI starts chasing down after him. At the same time, the mob tries to shoot Chris as he's running, but Chris manages to dodge all the bullets. Liz reads the note, walks out to her car, starts it, and puts it into drive to let it go over the cliff as it does. It causes all sorts of heavy objects to start falling down the cliffside, too. The FBI agents who are chasing Chris on the slope all hide to not be hit by the objects. Chris dodges everything, however, and continues running. Suddenly, he is stopped by Kelly. But as the objects come falling, Chris grabs Kelly and saves her at the same time on the road away from out on the roof, and the man from the mob that has been following him shoots him from another rooftop. Pretends to be dead. An FBI helicopter appears behind the shooter, who fires on the heli, and the agents have to kill him. Since Chris sees no way to save her on the roof in 2 hours, US that he should attempt to see clues that can take them to her earlier. Chris manages to see a plate number of a white van. They then manage to locate the vehicle in the harbor and the F. With Chris, who tells them what they should do to avoid unnecessary losses simultaneously. In the harbor, Liz is led into the van that Chris saw as they are about to. The FBI storms the facility, and the mob is overrun the van with Liz, and it quickly backs up, and Chris tells Kelly exactly when to shoot it so that it rolls around instead of blowing up. To stop rolling, Liz escapes the van and manages to run into a building. Meanwhile, Chris helps FBI agents to take out snipers while moving towards the building. Liz entered, but Liz is caught again and used as a human shield by the kidnappers and dragged into a big cargo ship. Inside, the mob members plan an explosive with a laser sensor. When the FBI team also has entered the ship, Chris sees the explosion in his head before it happens and warns the FBI agent who is about to set it off. As they continue, Chris suddenly gets shot in the chest, but like we expect, he foresaw that too and informs the FBI agents so they can shoot the sniper before the sniper shoots, and now to find Liz and her abductors in a large compartment they have ended up in. Chris starts going through different future alternatives of possible directions to head in, seemingly splitting himself up to search everywhere at once. Eventually, Chris, kidnapper R, and the FBI squad heads towards her. Soon after they bump into Liz and the abductor starts threatening Chris to shoot him if he gets closer. Chris tells him endings and none are good for him, so he should let her go. But the abductor says he will take his chances. Chris then starts walking towards them and the man starts to shoot at him. Extraordinary ability. He dodges every bullet. When the abductor has emptied his magazine and is out of bullets, he picks up the remote to blow the bomb that Liz is wearing, but Callie thinks fast and successfully manages to shoot the kidnapper dead. Chris tries to comfort Liz by telling her it's all over, but Callie informs them it's not. Apparently, the nuclear bomb has been moved. Immediately, as Chris gets to see a monitor that detects detonations in the area, he sees something happening in the future. He says something is wrong. And Callie asks. A Christian says he made a mistake and yells out, "It's happening now." And at that instant, the nuke detonates. Moments later, we see Chris lying in the bed at the motel. Everything. He gets up and calls Callie and tells her he will help as long as Liz gets to stay out of it. He wakes Liz up and tells her there's something he has to do, telling her he'll come back. Wait, in the final scene, Callie asks Chris if he's ready, to which he responds that he's the end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. See you next time. Movie Lovers Recap.